All right, let's get into this. We're talking about a really powerful idea from Mark Willen's book, It Didn't Start With You. And we're about to explore how your family's history might be shaping your life in ways you've probably never even thought of.
But first, just think about this for a second. What if those anxieties, those fears, those patterns you just can't seem to kick, what if they aren't even yours? What if they're actually echoes from a past you never lived?
So, how is that even possible, right? Well, to get our heads around it, we have to start with a story. And it's a story that sounds more like a medical mystery than anything else. So, let me tell you about a guy named Jesse. He's 19 years old, star athlete, straight A student, has his whole life right there in front of him.
But then, one night, right after his 19th birthday, he suddenly develops this crippling insomnia. He becomes absolutely, completely terrified to fall asleep.
And here's where it gets really weird. It wasn't just some general fear. It was this very specific, bizarre terror that he would freeze to death in his sleep. I mean, even on warm summer nights, he'd wake up shivering, totally convinced he was dying from the cold.
Doctors, therapy, nothing could explain it. Until one day, a piece of his family history comes out. It turns out Jesse had an uncle he never even met, an uncle who, 30 years before, had tragically frozen to death in a blizzard when he was just 19 years old. Jesse wasn't just having bad dreams, he was literally, unconsciously reliving his uncle's final terrifying moments.
Okay, so that just raises a huge question. How on earth does something like that happen? How can a trauma just skip a generation and show up in someone who never experienced it? Well, the answer is hiding deep inside our own biology.
This really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And science is pointing us to this incredible field that is completely changing how we think about what we inherit from our families. It's called epigenetics. And honestly, the best way to wrap your head around it is with a computer analogy. So think of your DNA as your computer's hardware. It's the physical machine. Epigenetics, then, are like software updates. A major trauma can act like a program that gets installed, and it changes how your genes work, especially your stress genes, without ever changing the actual hardware itself. So here's how that pathway works. Step 1, a grandparent goes through some huge trauma. Step 2, this experience creates these little epigenetic tags that latch onto their stress genes. And here's the amazing part. Scientists have found that these tags can actually survive and get passed down through sperm or egg cells. And the result? A child or a grandchild can be born with their biological dials for things like anxiety or fear already turned way up. They're basically pre-programmed for a danger they have never, ever met.
It reminds me of that famous William Faulkner quote. The past is never dead, it's not even past. It's not just a memory, it's a living, biological presence inside of us, right here, right now. Okay, so we've got the biological mechanism. That makes some sense, but there's another piece to this puzzle, and it's hiding in plain sight. It's in the actual words we choose when we try to describe our deepest fears.
Mark Willen calls this our core language. And these aren't just random phrases. They're like little verbal breadcrumbs, and they can lead us straight back to the source of an inherited trauma. It's like our subconscious mind is trying to tell us something important. Take Sandy's story, for example. On the surface, her problem was claustrophobia, a fear of closed spaces. But when she was asked to describe what would happen in her worst nightmare, her core language came out. She said, "I can't breathe, I can't get out, I'm gonna die." Well, it turns out her father's parents and his sister had died in a gas chamber at Auschwitz. Her words weren't just describing a fear. They were a precise, chilling description of their last moments on Earth.
And you see these patterns all the time. These core sentences, they're usually short, dramatic, really intense. Things like, "I'll lose everything," or "they'll abandon me." They feel like our deepest personal truth, but so often they're actually the unspoken truth of an ancestor whose story was just too painful to share. So if we're carrying around these biological echoes and these verbal clues, are we just doomed to repeat the past? And the answer is a huge, resounding no. In fact, just identifying these patterns is the first crucial step toward finally breaking the cycle.
I absolutely love this quote by Norman Doidge. It just perfectly sums up the goal here. We're not trying to forget the past or erase it. We're trying to understand it so that the things that used to haunt us can become a source of strength, a part of our history.
Before we make these connections, it really is like living with a ghost. You feel the effects, the anxiety, the depression, that fear you can't explain, but you don't know its name. You don't know where it came from. and it has power over you because it's invisible. But afterwards, once you understand the story, that ghost gets a name. It becomes an ancestor. And then you can see their pain, you can honor their struggle, and you can finally separate their fate from your own. You realize you don't have to carry their burden anymore, and their story becomes part of your heritage, something you can even draw strength from. And get this isn't just some nice-sounding idea. It's based on real science. Our brains are neuroplastic, meaning they can change. So by consciously creating new healing images, like visualizing our ancestors at peace or seeing ourselves free from their fate, we physically build new neural pathways. We are literally rewiring our own brains to react differently to those old triggers.
So let's bring all this together. What does it all mean for you, sitting here listening to this? Well, it means the patterns in your life might just be part of a much, much bigger family story.
And here's the most important takeaway of all. The traumas we inherit are not a life sentence. They're not a destiny. Think of them more like an invitation. They are the family's unfinished business knocking on our door, asking for us to finally give it a resolution. It's a story that's just looking for a better ending.
And that really leaves us with one last, powerful question to think about. If you look at your own patterns, your own unexplained fears, your own core language, what forgotten story is your family waiting for you to finally hear and to finally complete?